Hey guys, I'm Matt Lighty. This is my glorious new form, thanks to the Lake of Kalandra, and this is my KB, CF champ guide. If you want to know what that KBCF stands for, it of course means Corrupting Fever, Kinetic, Blasting, Blasty, Champy, Wampy. This build guide will be broken down to 5 different categories: Introductions and Basics, Leveling and Game Feel, Ascendancy, Tree and Jewels, Gearing and Skilling, then Crafting and Trade Pricing. This will not take forever. I do not like making build guides. So, introductions and basics. The gameplay demo you can see in the background behind you right now is what the build basically looks like. I turned off pretty much every MTX for skill and ability so you can see what it actually looks like. So yeah, enjoy that for like 10 seconds. Cool. Next part is area ranking. This is how I would roughly rank this build if I had to out of 5 in these arbitrary 5 categories. Clear, 5 out of 5. Single target, 2 out of 5. Slow but 0 risk of death, as in, you're not going to die by fighting bosses unless you're shit. Cost, 1 out of 5. Cost basically nothing to start up. It's maybe an exalted at best to do most content in the game. You can invest more if you want to. We'll get to that at the end. Survivability, 5 out of 5. Your suppression capped, ailment capped, got your tanky, tons of armor, lots of life gun hit. It's very, very survivable. We can pretty much not pay attention most of the time. I didn't, and I got to like 99 without much issue. In complexity, it's very basic. You could drive a car without knowing how to operate a car. It's kind of a similar presence, right? You're applying a physical dot. That's the gist of the build. But really, you push like 2 buttons. So how does the build work? Skill and core mechanics. Right. So the basis of this build is quite simple. The build revolves around Corrupting Fever that chunks you for a ton of life, then allows your shit to apply Corrupting Blood stacks each hit. Spending life to cast things refreshes Corrupting Fever's buff, keeping it up 100% of the time. Lasts about 8 seconds, so as long as you do anything every 8 seconds, you're good. Kinetic Blast hits a bunch and has insane AoE and range. This equals a bunch of Corrupting Blood stacks on pretty much everything around you quickly. Corrupting Blood caps at 10 stacks, which you want to hit, so fast attacking, overlapping AoE, projectiles from Pierce, Fork, and Chain even are good. Corrupting Fever is a physical dot. It is not a bleed. It's a different thing altogether. You could scale it with dot, fizz multi, global fizz, generic damage scaling, and most importantly, gem levels. Supplemental damage from curses and auras do help a lot. The general vibe of the build is you walk into a zone, press Corrupting Fever, which I like to put on spacebar, right-click, and then loot when the map is done. It's a very low input and an extremely chill way to play the game. Next category is just the aura and mana sustain. It's kind of an annoying thing for you playing builds that aren't life-based or don't have high mana regen. So at the moment, this build runs everything that doesn't use mana on life tap, pretty much. Everything is either life cost or life tapped, which means you can reserve 100% of your mana into auras and spells that require reservation. Now, since the recent removal of the 15% mana mastery for reservation, you do have to run level 3 or 4 Enlighten on your 50% auras to allow you to continue to run them like I did last league. Not a big deal though. And finally in this section, the build guide and PoE planner info will be in the description of the video. So if everything we're talking about in the video is annoying to digest audibly, you could do so visually in the written guide in the description. Alright, gameplay and leveling. So again, in the background you could see gameplay, you could get an idea of what it looks like. First category is bandits. You should always kill all bandits for 2 passives. There is no scenario, aside from a very small term race event, where you should not be killing all bandits for 2 passives. 2 passive points, outclass any other option. There is no discussion here. Pantheons, the ones I prefer, I like the Brine King, the Major. This gives you stun and freeze immunity. It's pretty comfy, and I like it. Also, for the miners, you have Aberrath for Burning Ground, or Ugul for Curse, helps with some curse issues. Those are my choices for those Pantheons. Maps, mods, and tips. The only thing I would really suggest for map mods is Fizz Reflect will kill you probably. Not guaranteed, but probably. You don't do a lot of damage on KB. Exsanguinate can reflect, Reap can reflect if you're using those. Corrupting Fever can't reflect. And even with both the back 2, you should have a lot of life gain and hit. You could probably still survive it, but I wouldn't run Fizz Reflect basically. No regen, less regen. You can run. It just sucks, and it sucks when you get to a boss. Mapping and bossing tips. Nice little 3-link that I think works really well for bossing is Culling Strike support plus Stormbrand plus either Arcane Surge or Life Tap. You can run either or. Life Tap if you just don't have the mana allocated, and if you do have the mana allocated, Arcane Surge for a little bit more damage on your spells. This is really nice for getting those 10 stacks of Corrupting Blood, plus also 10% more damage from that sweet Calling Strike. The leveling skill breakdown is basically on screen, but honestly, if you're like not a total fucking noob, just get to level 38 if you want to. The build really picks up there. Running Kinetic Blast plus GMP plus Life Tap plus Life Gain and Hit. That 4-link at 38 is like Gucci forever. If you want to like do it the hard way, like I've done it, but like this is the method to go about it pretty much. But once you get to 16, you could technically start using Corrupting Fever, and it'll be okay for clear. You just have no great way of applying the actual Corrupting Bloods. That's why I suggest waiting until 38. That's where the build really takes off. In the description, there's an early tree, but here's a screenshot of what it looks like, basically. You're just picking up the bare bones, and there's a secondary tree for a late game one in the document as well. Alright, so Ascendancy, Masteries, and Jewels. Ascendancy, explanation, why we champion, right? Champion makes us not die. Dying is bad. Living is good. All the aura stuff is good. And yeah, it just champion feels good. The order we pick up is aura stuff, then we do the 2 different roads to fortify, and then finally first to strike, last to fall for adrenaline. And pretty much every time we hit Corrupting Fever when we enter a map, it will allow us to proc adrenaline, which does give us a nice chunk of damage. The masteries you want to prioritize are any of the ones that reduce life cost. There's the life mastery has one, along with any sort of node that gives you life recovery, or life get and hit, or life on kill. You just basically want to have it so when you're actually attacking, you have no risk of dying from your own skills. Makes it the most comfy. Now, a kind of complicated portion is the unique jewels and placements. This build loves unique jewels. Now, all good builds love unique jewels, and this one is no exception. You run, ideally, a set of 4 to 5, actually really it's 6 to 7 unique jewels. Forbidden Flesh and Flame for gratuitous violence. This gives you the Gladiator Bleed Explosion, mass amount of clear from that. Impossible Escape is the Maven Keystone jumping one. Now there are 5 keystones that you'll see listed on screen here. Unwavering Stance, Iron Will, Leaf Shade, Chaos Inoculation, Conduit. You could jump to any of those and grab nice value around those areas. A Natural Instinct. This is also a very good Natural Instinct. Much like all Natural Instinct jewels placements, it's going to go around Scion, it's going to grab a bunch of goodies. Curse Effect, Fizz damage, Life Regen. It's actually a lot of Fizz damage. It's like 40% increased Fizz, which is a huge amount for scaling our Corrupting Fever damage. Inspired Learning. This build has basically free Inspired Learning placement. Between Marauder and Duelist, you just have to pick up Endurance charges. 1 set of Endurance charges, which you're already going to get anyway, probably, so it's basically free Inspired Learning. Watcher's Eyes. There's a lot of Watcher's Eyes mods that do affect it. Pretty much anything that affects Determination, Malevolence, Pride, Vitality, and Precision. You can swing those in. However, the big ones are the Malevolence dot damage, Pride Fizz damage, and the Vitality Life Gain and Hit is so comfy. Would recommend any combination of those 3 are very, very helpful. And the final unique jewel you could use if you wanted to is Melding in the Flesh. It did just get nerfed, but you could feel free to use that, plus Aegis Aurora, just like last league existed. This is a really nice way of getting high res with some little bit of supplemental block. Now, it just requires better gear to actually pull it off and more investment on tree, but getting that amount of max res is nice if you can afford to use it. For actual rare jewels, the large clusters, I have included in the description below. Here's a picture of an example of one. And Crimson Jewels, you pretty much just want the same things you want as always. It's Fizz, Life, multi for, Fizz, multi for overtime. This, thankfully, Corrupting Fever doesn't really scale off of too many things. It's really quite streamlined. Again, we discussed earlier, but it's pretty much just Fizz dot, dot multi, damage overtime, generic damage, Fizz damage. That's about it. There's not much ways to scale it, so our investments are pretty limited in the rare jewel department. So gearing and skills, on screen is the different link setups. You can mess with these, but a couple are pretty much set in stone. So if your Kinetic Blast setup is KB, Life Tap, GMP, plus either Life Gain, Pierce, Fork, or Maim. This depends on the setup you want. If you have a Life Gain on hit on rings or on a Watcher's Eye, you don't need it on your your setup. It's just, this is where your specific contextual situation comes into play. For example, Kinetic Blast has an alt quality that gives it Pierce. If it does, you do not need to use the Pierce. But if you have the alt quality that gives it AoE per forking, then you might want to run Fork. Fork gives you the most probably outdoor clear. Pierce is better indoor clear. This is where it kind of comes up in the air. But the first 3 nodes are kind of non-negotiable. KB, Life Tap, GMP. Corrupting Fever. Thankfully, there's only basically 6 things that actually work for this. So, it's Corrupting Fever, Efficacy, Life Tap, Swift Deflection, Brutality, and Empower. That is it. Gem levels are king, hence you want to pump that and power up. This league, especially using things like Dialias or Skin of the Lords and Loyal, are fantastic. Poet's Pen. You can either run a Poet's Pen or a Rare Wand. I'll include a Rare Wand crafting description in the next page, but it is Poet's Pen, Exsanguinate, Reap, and the last one can either be Control Destruction or Brutality. That's up to you. Auras, Pride, Determination, Malevolence, and you want to slap an Enlighten there. And then War Banner, which we get for free, plus Herald of Purity. Those are all our basic auras. You could sometimes use a Vitality level 1, or, for example, a Precision level 1, depending on your Watcher's Eye. Cast and damage taken setup keeps us alive. Pretty simple. And we actually use no movement skill. You can if you want, but I'd tell you just to walk, you shithead, because I did it. It's not much of a problem. You move quite fast depending on how you have your setup with Rampage, etc., or Quicksilvers. I don't really have much. This build is quite socket hungry, so I didn't really have the luxury of having movement skill. If you want to run one, you can just toss in a singular dash or something. That's up to you. Alt quality gems. We touched about a little bit earlier, but there's 2 different Kinetic Blasts that do things. One of them pierces, and one of them gives you AoE when forking. Now, these actually get better when you're on Ashes of the Stars, like most alt quality things. So if you want to run Ashes, I would suggest investing in the alt quality gems. These will kind of change how you feel. It just gives you more clear. The more you pierce, the more corrupting blood. More corrupting bloods. The forking gives you AoE plus more corrupting bloods. It's just more clear. Herald of Purity. The anomalous version taunts on hit, which kind of helps peel single target aggro. So that's a thing. And then the Divergent, Pride, and Malevolence is just more. For generic gearing, it's not too complicated. You want life, res, chaos res, suppression. If you could somehow get gem levels or fizz damage or dot multi, get it. If not, then that's fine. You want to get as much of those base things as you can, because you can run a lot of uniques if you so choose. Here are some examples of uniques you can run. For body, you have Brass Dome, keeps you alive. Skin of the Lords, Skin of the Loyal, and Dialias gives you a bunch of damage because it's gem levels. Dialias is better than ever. So any of these work perfectly fine. Boots, I'd probably say rare. Gloves, you want to run either Hemophilias with Vuln or Ascendancy with Vuln if you're doing a double corrupt or somehow you have an extra curse thing. That's fantastic. You want some way of getting explosion. So Hemophilias, Ascendancy, or like we mentioned before, if you're doing a Forbidden Fresh and Forbidden Flame for gratuitous violence, there's your explosions and you can run a rare. Belt, your best in slot, no surprise, Mage Blood. Your second best in slot, either Headhunter or Replica Headhunter. After that, probably Biscos for Rampage. And then after that, like a Rustic Sash or a Stygian for some fizz, extra fizz damage. Plus, again, what are the core things we want? Life, res, chaos res, suppression, max res, just the basic things. Your rings. If you don't have Vuln on hit, then I would suggest getting it on a Warlord ring. That is quite easy to do. It is a guaranteed thing. You just have to roll it. Then you could do some sort of Harvest Craft for, Curse Caster, Warlord ring for Vuln. Pretty nice. Amulet. Your best in slot is probably Ashes of the Stars. If not, just some crazy rare that has +2 gem levels. Because Ashes gives you all that fun quality stuff, plus its reservation, plus it's just got, gem levels. Ashes is very good. Your offhand is either a shield if you're doing an Aegis or building the flesh thing. That's fine. Otherwise, you just want to have spell damage, gem levels, and you can check my character from previous league to see examples of the gear he's wearing, or check PoE Ninja for examples of generic and best in slot gear. And finally, we have crafting and trade pricing. So I put on the screen, this is like the average cost of these uniques in Sentinel League based off of week 1 pricing. I also include low, highs, and mids. Now, this is totally, bullshit wackadoodle numbers, but I did pull the accurate ones. Interpret it as you like. All I would really suggest for this build's budget, I'd buy Poet's Pen, I'd buy Tabby, I'd buy Hemophilias, and I would just sit on the rest. If you could somehow afford and Inspired Learning early on, go for it. Like, is Unnatural Instinct worth 1,000 plus chaos? Not at all. Its impact is extremely low. So Poet's Pen, Hemophilia, Tabby. If you could sprinkle in Inspired Learning, fantastic. If not, no worries, right? You want to get a 6-link, get a Brass Dome, get a Dialias. That's fine. But those are your key 3. Poet's Pen, Hemophilia, and get on that 6-link as fast as... If you do want to craft yourself a +2 wand and you say, fuck Poet's Pen, I'm going to be a real elite crafter. Here's some examples of crafting instructions for making yourself a lovely +2 wand. Lord only knows how this is going to work with New Harvest, so take it all with a grain of salt. But in the written guide, there are examples of how to do a lot of these things in Craft of Exile, so feel free to check those out. But yeah, that about wraps it up for the most part. Again, the build is fantastic for clear. It is fantastic for surviving. It costs very little in trade. It's a little annoying in solo self-found because getting like Poet's Pen can be a ball ache. Complexity is not very complex, and it's you know, single target is lackluster. But again, it has no problem fighting any boss in the game, including uber versions of things. I did the Feared last league, no problem. It's just, you know, you're just running around for an extra 5-10 minutes compared to playing Seismic Trap. But yeah, if you have any questions, ask them in the comments below. All the information's in the video, all the information is in the PvE Planner thing, and all the information is in the written variation included in the description. But this should have basically covered the gist of it, which is all I could offer in these trying times. Good luck for those playing the build, or whatever build, in 3.19 Lake of Kalandra. I'm Matt Lighty, and you have a good day.